What's up, YouTube? This is Dave's Had Enough White 7. This is another video to do with my weekly review for the TV series The Exorcist, Episode 2, Lupus in Fabula review, and another video from Dave. And yeah, pretty much this is my weekly review for The Exorcist TV series, which I have to say is doing really well, in my opinion. From last week to this week, I think the momentum carried over and raised the fucking bar. I have to say, at first, I was skeptical. I was like, how are they going to do The Exorcist on TV? You know, because if you go from the original Exorcist and what that movie had in it to a TV series on Fox, come on. But I have to say, they're really pulling it off. This review will not be too long because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do this review because currently I am moving. So I'm going to go over key parts that happened in the episode and give my score. And next week, I promise, I'll go a little bit more into detail with the next episode. Alright, so this episode, you actually have it starting off with a group of young boys in a basement with priests. So I was like, what the fuck's going on here? And you see one of the boys coming with the priest through the door, and he's like, I'm sorry. And then the priest looks at the other boy, and he tells him, you, come with me, or something like that. And he grabs a Bible, and he has a cross. So he goes into this, like, dark room through an alley. It's really fucking creepy. You're hearing noises from, ahead of them. And pretty much the priest stops, and the boy just goes just goes by himself with this fucking lantern. And all of a sudden he gets to this point where, he's going into this, this one area, and all of a sudden the fucking light or the lamp just cuts off. And then all of a sudden pops back on, and there's the person that's possessed chained to the wall right in front of him. And pretty much, saying all this shit to him, keeping it, PG-13 for TV, because this is a TV series. And they say this, like the title of the episode, Lupus in Fabula, which means speak of the wolf and he will come, which is, when you look more further into it, it's speak of the devil. So basically that's said, and then you have it goes, and you could tell the boy was scared at first, and then he wasn't scared. You could tell that. So it's basically something to test these boys to become, basically priests to do exorcisms and stuff like that. So later on, we learn that was Marcus as a young boy, because Marcus basically breaks into Father Thomas's apartment after leaving the mental institution, and goes through all his shit. Basically has tea going, listening to music. He has it all going. He's like in this guy's house like he's living there. Father Thomas comes home like, what the fuck? And he actually looked through Father Thomas's letters that he has to Jessica. And he tells him in the episode, he says, you're going to have to cut it off with her, because the demon's going to use that against you if we're going to help this family. So basically, you learn in this episode they're going to get together, and they have to, they have to let each other know their secrets, because that could be used against them, And we learn in this episode too that Father Marcus from last episode, when he had went against the boy that was possessed and the boy died, he lost his faith, because there's a part in the episode where he goes looking for this guy that they met, that he saw at the church, that went after Casey and tried to basically touch her, because there's this part in the church where basically Casey and Kat are helping the homeless, basically feeding them. And there's this really strange looking homeless man that's sitting on a bench, and he's staring at Casey, and he actually goes up to Casey and starts talking to her all weird and tells her, he chose you, can I touch you, freaks her out. And you have Marcus basically going up there helping her, pulling him out of the church. And before he leaves the church, he says something to Marcus, and Marcus actually goes and follows this bum to a homeless area, which he sees the bum getting on basically I would say some kind of work truck, delivery truck type thing. And he goes, investigates, the homeless man's area, which is a tent and a lot of other homeless people around. He's looking through his tent, and all of a sudden this fucking bag lady jumps up at him, or rises up out of tent. You don't see her at first, and she's possessed in full blown Linda Blair mode, and she's basically taunting him and talking all crazy to him, and he pulls out his cross and it does nothing. And she's taking a cross and putting it to her head while he's saying the power of Christ compels you. And he's learning that there's more people that are kind of involved in this, that are possessed. So this is something's going to go on. And throughout the episode, you have this young teenager that's listening to headphones. You see him on a bike. So I'm like, what the fuck's that? You see it in the beginning of the episode, you see it in about the middle, and then you see it at the end, which we'll get to in just a second. So you have all that goes on with Father Marcus. And then with Casey is another focus on this episode. You have her basically progressing in the exorcism. You have Casey pretty much at a lacrosse game where she's playing lacrosse, and one of the opponents against her that she's playing in, she's on a team, and the other team, they have this other girl that's basically pushing her down and shoving her, basically bullying her on the field. And then Casey sees this man where her sister's sitting on the bleachers because her sister's actually watching her game. And we learn that this guy is called the Salesman. And he kind of like waves to her or something like that. And she looks at him. And then all of a sudden Casey kind of like, you could tell she like kind of changes. And she's looking at the girl. And all of a sudden when the girl's running, her like leg snaps and her bones sticking out. It's kind of fucking nasty. So you have a part later on where they're playing like Jenga, having family night, and the mother comes home and the dad's playing and Casey and Kat's playing, and then you have Casey. She goes and grabs the one of the Jenga blocks and grabs it at the bottom, and that's just basically, you could tell normally it would fall, but it's actually staying perfect. And the dad's like, "Wow, how's that even possible?" And then the mother automatically knows, she's looking at Casey because she already feels that she's possessed, and you could see Casey like looking at her through the hole of the Jenga the Jenga stack, and it's kind of creepy. There's a lot of creepy parts with Casey this episode for sure. Other things you have to happen in this episode, you have Father Tomas. We actually get to see Jessica. He meets with Jessica. That don't go too well. He takes Father Marcus's advice and pretty much goes and meets her, trying to break things off, which I don't think he broke things off, because she goes for his hand, he pulls away, he's like, "We can't do this." And then, she tells him, "Well, why'd you call me?" And then he says, "Well, since you came all this way, stay." And she tells him something like, "Oh, I like the letters that you write." So it really, she's like, basically tells him to write a letter. She leaves, so it didn't end. It's not over with. So you have some other parts with Casey too in this episode, other than what I just mentioned with the whole thing with the Jenga and the lacrosse game. You have her basically this bug scene where Angela goes into a room because she gets a weird phone call from her job, and it's some kind of like noises going on the phone. She gets home, she sees it's a call from Casey, and she's looking for Casey in the house, and she goes upstairs, and Casey's phone's on the pillow. And then Casey and the dad and Kat come back from ice cream, and pretty much there's the phone, and they pick the phone up, and this like centipede type thing or some kind of bug is like under the phone. It kind of like makes them all like pretty much jump, and then it goes under the bedspread, and they lift the bedspread up, and there's a bunch of them. So then you have another weird part where they're at that back at that where I was talking about with the homeless man that approached Casey. You have Angela basically approaching Father Tomas and telling him, "Hey, can you help me? Did you give the evidence that I gave you?" And the evidence that she gave him was a scene with this scene, which I found really creepy, where Angela saw her daughter at the dining table basically touching herself and talking in some other voice, and when she gets near her, she's like, "Yeah, your lying mother's right near you," like talking this other voice, and then she snaps out of it, and then Angela jumps, and she takes that video and gives it to Father Tomas, and that's why she approaches him at the church, because Father Tomas took it to the other priest above him, and they basically looked at it, and they said, and he recommends an exorcism, Father Tomas, and the one priest looks at him like he's like kind of crazy. He's like, "That's a we only do that under certain circumstances, something like that. And pretty much he's like, this girl needs to go see a psychiatrist. So with that, you basically have at the part with the church, he tells Angela, he's like, hey, you need to get some help from a doctor and psychiatrist. I'm here for you, but we got to do certain steps. It's not just that easy. Just he basically tells her it's not that easy just to do an exorcism. So she gets mad, grabs this holy water that he was blessing. She has a water bottle, basically pours the water out, gets the holy water. Then Father Marcus popped out of nowhere because he was there with the bum scene. But before that, he tells her, he says, do you know what you're doing with that? Because he comes and approaches her, and she's like, who are you? And he's like, I'm Father Marcus. And he's like, are you Angela? Is your daughter Casey? And then he says, do you know how to use that? He's like, and he tells her basically put it in her drinking water. So she does that later on at dinner, and pretty much you have Casey drinking the water and nothing's happening. So when she's putting the dishes away, you start tell something's gonna go on, and then she tells them, oh, I'm just gonna go to sleep. And she basically runs up the stairs, pukes in the toilet, and basically all this like green shit comes out, and then one of the big centipedes, I guess that's what they are, of this insect, comes all the way through her mouth, like just pulling it like a snake, and it goes into the toilet. And then later on, after that happens, she's sitting outside, and that same man that was at her lacrosse game, which I'm assuming they call him the salesman, he shows up. And he's talking to her, and she's like, and he says, tell me everything. And she's like, let's keep this between us. And the father's looking out the window, and he just sees her talking to herself, but he's half with it. Her father's not with it after his brain trauma. So he's just looking. So they're not going to believe him if he did say something. Hey, she's out there talking to herself. Well, maybe the mother would. But yeah, you have that going on, and then throughout the episode, like I said, you have that boy, the teenager that's on the bicycle, and then they actually do something with that at the end when he actually goes home, goes in the house, and he says, hi, Dad, and his dad's actually on the couch, murdered, and then the mother's in the bathroom, all cut up, and basically you have these people in his house, and when the boy walks into, or the teenager walks into the room, they slice his throat, and you see them like taking like organs and stuff. And then when he walks out, then you see that bum too that got on the work truck. And then there's a bunch of them coming out of houses. And then they end it pretty much with Father Marcus watching the news and reading something. And it says there's a mass murder, 9 people. And then, he kind of looks at that and then looks out the window. So that's basically how the episode ends. I actually really enjoyed it. Like I said, the momentum to last week brought over to this week. Raise the bar. If I had a score this week, I would gave last week a 9, this one a 9.3. I thought it was great. I enjoyed it. But yeah, tell me what you think in the comment section. Sorry for me just running through the review like this. I wanted to get this out. I really appreciate all the feedback from my first review. Next week will be a lot more better. I don't think this is bad, but this is the best I could do for you this week with moving. Or I would have had to do the review later. But tell me what you guys think in the comment section. More videos to come. Thank you, YouTube.